By the time the hearing ended, Lauren Boebert would wish she had never opened her mouth. One phrase would echo across every news network in America for the next 72 hours. I have the receipts. What made her say it? You're going to want to hear this. The House Oversight Committee hearing on January 23rd was supposed to be routine, federal contracting oversight, dry material. The kind of session C-SPAN covers, but cable news ignores. Lauren Boebert entered the chamber at 9:47 a.m. with the confidence of someone who had already decided how the morning would go. She wore her signature red blazer, her hair perfectly styled, her expression somewhere between boredom and contempt. She had been on Fox News the night before, laughing about Democratic freshmen who thought they could play in the big leagues. She had specifically mentioned Jasmine Crockett by name, mispronouncing it deliberately, suggesting that perhaps the representative from Texas should spend less time on television and more time learning how government actually works. Boebert settled into her seat with the ease of someone who owned the space. She leaned back in her chair, scrolled through her phone, and when Crockett entered the chamber 3 minutes later, Boebert made sure her laugh was loud enough to carry. She turned to the Republican staffer seated behind her and said something that made him suppress a grin. The microphones were not yet live, but the cameras caught the exchange. Crockett's expression did not change. She carried a single leather folio under her arm. No assistants, no stack of binders. Just one slim folder and a look of absolute composure. The chairman called the session to order at 10:02 a.m. Boebert was allocated 7 minutes for her opening statement. She began with a sigh that suggested she was doing everyone a favor by being present. Mr. Chairman, I want to talk about waste. Real waste. Not the kind of political theater we've been subjected to lately, but actual taxpayer dollars being flushed down the drain by this administration's complete inability to manage basic contracting processes. Her tone was that of a high school teacher lecturing a particularly slow class. She continued without notes, her delivery smooth and practiced. We have representatives in this chamber, and I won't name names, though I'm sure everyone knows who I'm referring to, who want to lecture the American people about accountability, while they themselves have never run so much as a lemonade stand. They've never met payroll. They've never had to make the hard decisions that actual business owners make every single day. She paused, looked directly at Crockett, and smiled. Maybe if some of our colleagues spent less time on TikTok and more time reading the actual legislation they're voting on, we wouldn't be in this mess. The room stirred. A few Republicans chuckled. Crockett remained perfectly still, her pen moving steadily across the legal pad in front of her. She did not look up. Boebert took the silence as permission to continue. I've been a business owner for over a decade. I understand contracts. I understand what happens when government overreach strangles the private sector. And I understand, perhaps better than some of my colleagues, what it takes to actually create jobs instead of just talking about creating jobs. She went on for another 4 minutes, building a case about federal contracting inefficiencies, citing dollar amounts and agency names, constructing an argument that sounded authoritative to anyone who was not paying close attention. She mentioned the Department of Energy, the GSA, FEMA contracts during natural disasters. She spoke about small businesses being crushed by compliance costs. Her voice rose and fell with practiced rhythm. She was, by all appearances, in complete control of the room. At the 6-minute mark, she arrived at her conclusion. So before we start pointing fingers and demanding investigations, maybe we should ask ourselves whether the people doing the pointing have any idea what they're talking about. Maybe we should ask whether they've ever actually built anything. Maybe we should ask whether they're here to serve the American people or to serve their own ambitions. She sat down to applause from her side of the aisle. The chairman thanked her. Boebert leaned back, crossed her arms, and waited. Jasmine Crockett was recognized at 10:14 a.m. She stood slowly, smoothed the front of her navy suit jacket, and opened the leather folio with the kind of care someone might use when handling something fragile. Her voice when she spoke was quiet enough that several members in the back leaned forward to hear. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the Congresswoman's passion. I really do. And I appreciate her concern about federal contracting waste. It's something we should all care about deeply. She paused, glanced down at the open folder, then looked up at Boebert with an expression of such perfect calm that it bordered on serene. The Congresswoman mentioned business ownership. She mentioned meeting payroll. She mentioned understanding contracts. Another pause. I'd like to address that. But first, I want to make sure I understand her position correctly. Congresswoman Boebert, you stated, and I'm quoting from the transcript of your Fox News appearance last night, that Democrats in this chamber wouldn't know a legitimate contract if it hit them in the face. Is that an accurate representation of your position? Boebert did not hesitate. That's correct. Crockett nodded slowly. Thank you for confirming. She turned to a marked page in the folder. I want to talk about a specific contract. Federal contract number GS07F0129Y. Are you familiar with that contract number, Congresswoman? Boebert's smile tightened slightly. I'm familiar with thousands of federal contracts. You'll have to be more specific. Of course. Crockett's voice remained gentle. This is a GSA schedule contract. It was awarded in March of 2021 to a limited liability company called Shooter's Grill, LLC. The contract was for food service provision at federal facilities. The total authorized value was $287,000 over a 2-year period. She looked up. Does that help narrow it down? The room had gone very quiet. Boebert's face had not changed, but her hands, which had been resting casually on the table, were now flat against the surface. I'm aware of that contract. What about it? Crockett turned another page. The sound of the paper was surprisingly loud. The contract required monthly progress reports to be filed with the contracting officer. Standard procedure. The contract also required that all food service personnel maintain current health certifications as required by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. She paused. Between March 2021 and November 2021, how many monthly progress reports were filed by Shooter's Grill LLC with the GSA contracting officer? Boebert's jaw tightened. I'd have to check the records. I have them here. Crockett's tone did not change. The answer is 0. Not a single monthly progress report was filed during that 8-month period. The contract required them. They were not provided. The contracting officer sent 3 separate written requests for the overdue reports. No response was received to any of those requests. She pulled a paper from the folder and held it up, angled so the C-SPAN camera could catch the official GSA letterhead. This is the 3rd request, dated October 15, 2021. It states, and I'm quoting, "Failure to provide required progress documentation will result in contract suspension and potential termination for cause." She set the letter down carefully. On November 30, 2021, the contract was terminated, not for convenience, for cause. That's government language for breach of contract terms. The silence that followed was total. Boebert's face had gone from confident pink to something closer to white. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. The Republican members who had been chuckling 8 minutes earlier were now completely still, their eyes fixed on their own notepads. Someone in the press gallery stopped typing. 10 seconds, 15, 20. The only sound was the mechanical hum of the ventilation system and the faint rustle of papers as Crockett turned to the next marked section in her folder. Finally, Boebert spoke. Her voice was different now, higher, tighter. That contract was handled by our management team. I wasn't personally involved in the day-to-day administration. Crockett looked up. I understand, but you are listed as the managing member of Shooter's Grill LLC on the Colorado Secretary of State Business Registration. You signed the GSA contract proposal as the authorized representative of the company. Your signature is on page 47 of the proposal document, right above the section that says, "The undersigned certifies that they have read and understand all contract requirements and will ensure full compliance." She held up another document, Boebert's signature clearly visible even from across the room. So while I appreciate that you may not have been handling daily administration, you did certify that you understood the contract requirements and would ensure compliance. Is that correct? Boebert's voice was sharp now. This is a partisan attack. You're digging through old business records trying to manufacture a scandal. Crockett's expression did not change. She set the document down with the same careful precision. Congresswoman, I'm not manufacturing anything. I'm reading from official government contract records. These are public documents. Anyone can request them through FOIA. She paused. Let that settle. But let's move on, because the terminated contract isn't actually what concerns me most. She pulled a small stack of papers from the folder, each one clipped together. What concerns me are the invoices. During the 8 months the contract was active, Shooters Grill LLC submitted 6 invoices to the General Services Administration for payment. The total amount invoiced was $114,000. The invoices claimed food service provision at the federal building in Grand Junction, Colorado, for between 40 and 65 federal employees per service period, depending on the month. Crockett held up the first invoice, dated April 2021. This invoice claims service provision for 47 federal employees on April 12th through April 16th. Total billed $18,200. The invoice was paid by GSA on May 3rd, 2021. She set it down and held up the second invoice. May 2021, service for 52 federal employees. Total billed $19,800, paid June 1st. She continued through all 6 invoices, reading the amounts and dates in a steady, clinical voice. When she finished, she looked up. Here's what's interesting. The GSA Inspector General conducted a routine audit of food service contracts in the Western region in early 2022. The audit included interviews with federal employees at the Grand Junction facility. Would you like to know what they found? Boebert did not answer. Her face was now fully flushed, red climbing up her neck. She started to speak, stopped, started again. I don't know what some Inspector General claimed to find. They found, Crockett continued, her voice cutting through cleanly, that no Shooters Grill food service was ever provided at that facility. Not in April, not in May, not ever. The federal employees interviewed, all 23 of them, stated that they had never seen anyone from Shooters Grill at the building, had never received any food service from that company, and were not aware that such a contract existed until the IG contacted them during the audit. She held up a new document, this one with the Office of Inspector General seal visible at the top. This is page 12 of the IG report, dated March 2022. It states, contractor invoiced for services not rendered. Site inspection revealed no evidence of food service provision at claimed location during claimed time periods. Recommendations: referral to GSA Office of General Counsel for recovery of funds. Potential referral to Department of Justice if evidence of intentional fraud is established. The room was completely silent now, not a single sound. Boebert's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her hands were shaking slightly. A Republican member 2 seats down from her started to stand, thought better of it, and sat back down. The chairman looked like he wanted to call a recess, but could not figure out how to interrupt. Crockett carefully placed the IG report on the table in front of her. Congresswoman Boebert, did Shooters Grill LLC provide food service at the Grand Junction Federal Building during the period covered by those invoices? 23 seconds of absolute silence. Boebert's face went through a series of expressions: defiance, confusion, panic, calculation. She looked at her Republican colleagues. No one met her eyes. She looked at her staff member, who was staring at his phone with the intensity of someone trying to disappear. She opened her mouth twice. The first time nothing came out. The second time she managed, I would need to review the records with my attorney before making any statement about. I'm not asking for a legal statement, Crockett said, her voice still impossibly calm. I'm asking a simple factual question. Did your company provide the food service it billed the federal government $114,000 for? Yes or no? Boebert's voice cracked. This is a partisan witch hunt. You're trying to. I'll take that as a no. Crockett pulled another document from the folder. In December 2022, the GSA Office of General Counsel sent a demand letter to Shooters Grill LLC requesting repayment of $114,000 plus interest for services not rendered. The letter was sent to the business address on file, certified mail. It was signed for on December 18, 2022. Was that demand paid? Boebert was breathing fast now, her chest rising and falling visibly. I'm not going to sit here and be ambushed with documents I haven't had a chance to review. It's a yes or no question, Congresswoman. Was the $114,000 paid back? No. The word came out strangled. Crockett nodded slowly. So, to be clear, your company submitted invoices for $114,000 in food services that were never provided. The Inspector General documented that the services were not provided. The GSA demanded repayment, and as of today, January 23, 2026, that money has not been repaid. Is that an accurate summary? Boebert slammed her hand on the table. You have no right to weaponize government agencies against political opponents. This is exactly the kind of. Congresswoman. Crockett's voice cut through like a blade wrapped in silk. I didn't weaponize anything. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request. I read public documents. I'm asking you about your own business practices. You spent 7 minutes lecturing this chamber about fiscal responsibility and contract compliance. You questioned whether your colleagues, specifically me, understand how contracts work. She paused. Let the room absorb that. I'm simply asking whether you understand how they work. Because submitting invoices for work you didn't perform is called fraud, Congresswoman. It's not a partisan issue. It's just math. The breakdown was complete. Boebert pushed her chair back so hard it nearly tipped. Her face was now entirely red, sweat visible at her hairline despite the makeup. She ripped the microphone off her lapel, the small clip clattering against the table. I will not participate in this kangaroo court. This is a disgrace. She grabbed her phone and her notepad, both hands shaking, and walked toward the chamber exit. Her footsteps echoed. The cameras followed her all the way to the door. She did not look back. The empty chair sat there, a physical monument to the collapse. The Republican members sat frozen, none of them willing to move or speak. The Democratic side of the aisle was equally silent, but for different reasons. They were watching Crockett, who had remained perfectly still through the entire exit, her hands resting calmly on the open folder. After Boebert disappeared through the door, Crockett spoke again. Her voice was quieter now, almost reflective. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to continue if that's acceptable. The chairman, still visibly rattled, nodded. The gentle lady may proceed. Crockett turned to a new section of the folder. I want to talk about why this matters, because this isn't really about one terminated contract or one unpaid debt. It's about a pattern, and it's about the people who get hurt when contracts aren't honored. She pulled out a photograph and held it up. The image showed a middle-aged man in a work shirt standing in front of a construction site. This is Robert Chen. He's a subcontractor who worked on renovations at Shooter's Grill in 2020. He was hired to install new kitchen equipment, upgrade the electrical systems, and renovate the bathrooms. The contract was for $47,000. He completed the work in August 2020. The work was inspected and approved by the Garfield County Building Inspector on August 24th. She set the photo down carefully. Mr. Chen submitted his final invoice on September 1st, 2020. Payment was due within 30 days per the contract terms. He was not paid in 30 days. He sent a follow-up invoice in November. No response. He sent a formal demand letter in January 2021. No response. In March 2021, he filed a mechanic's lien against the property. The lien was contested. In July 2021, he filed a civil suit in Garfield County Court seeking payment. Crockett's voice remained steady, but something had changed in it. Something colder. Something with more weight. The case went to trial in November 2021. Mr. Chen represented himself because he could not afford an attorney. He presented the signed contract, the approved inspection reports, photographs of the completed work, and time-stamped invoices. Shooter's Grill LLC did not appear at the trial. The company was represented by an attorney who argued that the work was substandard and that payment should be withheld pending corrections. The judge reviewed the inspection reports, which showed that all work met code requirements, and ruled in favor of Mr. Chen. The judgment was for $47,000 plus court costs and interest, totaling $52,340. She paused, turned the page. That judgment was issued on November 19, 2021. As of last week, it has not been paid. Mr. Chen is 68 years old. He closed his contracting business in 2023 because he could not recover from the financial impact of that unpaid contract. He now works part-time at a hardware store in Rifle, Colorado. The room had changed. The silence was different now. Heavier, more uncomfortable. Several members were no longer looking at Crockett. They were looking at their hands, their papers, anywhere else. Crockett pulled out another photograph. This is Maria Gutierrez. She worked as a line cook at Shooter's Grill from June 2019 through March 2020. She was paid $14.50 per hour. In January 2020, she worked 67 hours of overtime during a particularly busy period around a local festival. Colorado law requires overtime pay at time and a half for hours over 40 per week. Her overtime pay for that month should have been $730. It was not included in her paycheck. She asked her manager about it. She was told it would be included in the next check. It was not. She asked again. She was told that salaried employees don't receive overtime, except she was not a salaried employee, she was hourly. Crockett's voice remained clinical, but the facts themselves carried the weight. In March 2020, Maria filed a wage complaint with the Colorado Department of Labor. The investigation found that she was indeed owed the overtime pay. The department issued an order requiring Shooters Grill LLC to pay the $730 plus penalties. The order was issued in June 2020. The payment was due in 30 days. It was not paid. Additional penalties accrued. The total owed is now $1,847. It has not been paid. Maria Gutierrez is a single mother with 2 children. That $730 in 2020 represented nearly a month of her grocery budget. She carefully placed both photographs on the table, side by side. Congresswoman Boebert spent 7 minutes telling this chamber that she understands contracts, that she understands what it means to meet payroll, that she knows what it takes to build something. Crockett's eyes moved across the Republican side of the aisle, meeting each gaze that would hold hers. But Robert Chen is still waiting for his $52,000. Maria Gutierrez is still waiting for her $1,847. The General Services Administration is still waiting for its $114,000, and all of those debts were incurred by the same business that Congresswoman Boebert told Fox News last night is evidence of her superior understanding of how the real world works. She closed the folder with a soft sound that carried in the silent chamber. This isn't partisan, Mr. Chairman. This is pattern documentation. When someone lectures others about fiscal responsibility while leaving a trail of unpaid contractors, unpaid workers, and defrauded government agencies, that's not a political difference. That's hypocrisy, backed by evidence. Crockett looked at the empty chair where Boebert had been sitting 20 minutes earlier. The Congresswoman questioned my qualifications at the start of this hearing. She suggested I don't understand contracts. She's right that I've never run a restaurant. But I spent 6 years as a civil rights attorney representing workers who weren't paid what they were owed and contractors who completed work and never saw a dime. I've read thousands of contracts, I've litigated hundreds of wage theft cases, and I've learned to recognize a pattern when I see one. She picked up the folder and held it against her chest. I understand that the Congresswoman has left the chamber, but I want to state clearly for the record that I will be referring the GSA Inspector General's report to the House Ethics Committee for review. I will also be requesting that the committee examine whether a member's ongoing failure to satisfy documented civil judgments and federal repayment demands constitutes conduct unbecoming of this institution. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried something beyond calm. It carried exhaustion, the weariness of someone who has fought this fight too many times before. We cannot lecture the American people about accountability while refusing to be held accountable ourselves. We cannot demand fiscal responsibility from agencies while defrauding those same agencies. We cannot claim to understand the struggles of small business owners while leaving small business owners bankrupt and uncompensated for completed work. Crockett looked directly at the C-SPAN camera. Robert Chen did the work. Maria Gutierrez worked the hours. The federal government paid in good faith for services it expected to receive. They all deserve what they're owed. And if we're going to stand in this chamber and talk about contract compliance and fiscal responsibility, we need to start by holding ourselves to the same standards we demand from everyone else. She sat down. Her jacket was perfectly smooth. Her expression was composed. The folder rested closed on the table in front of her. The chairman looked around the room, visibly uncertain how to proceed. After a moment, he called a 15-minute recess. As members filed out, Crockett remained seated, making notes on her legal pad with the same steady, unhurried pen strokes she had maintained from the beginning. The hearing resumed 23 minutes later. Lauren Boebert did not return. Her seat remained empty for the rest of the session. The photographs of Robert Chen and Maria Gutierrez stayed on the table where Crockett had placed them, visible to every camera in the room, a reminder that behind every contract number and every dollar amount, there were people who had simply wanted to be paid for the work they had done.